Everybody. Bit of a short show this evening, only going to be on for about half an hour, but I wanted to catch up with you guys, see what y'all were up to, see what you guys are working on. If you got any questions on your Mopar powered contraption or kind of motorcycle stuff, whatever you guys have in mind, hit me up, let me know what I can answer for you. So, in short, in terms of like the Mopar type thing, I got to tell you, as much as I would love to say, yes, there's this new project and it's going to be this, that, or whatever, there's just not enough interest in it right now. And I hate to say it like that because it's almost like an oversimplification or more of a generalization of just kind of where the whole motorsports thing is for me, and really how it is for me in terms of Mopar in general. I'm having a real difficult time zeroing in on what would make it worth my time to do a build, like a really good, solid something. Anyway, and about the only thing I could think of would be either something with the F-150 or something with Buffy once Buffy is retired as a work truck. And the unfortunate thing is that for me to do anything to Buffy is going to cost significant dollars, and those dollars would be better suited to be spent on the F-150, mainly just because for about the same amount of money, the F-150 would be pretty brutal and it wouldn't really suffer anything. In other words, throw a supercharger or a turbo kit on that thing. So that's kind of where we're at. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is I've done a couple of videos here fairly recently talking about naturally aspirated stuff and versus and or should you do it versus a boost build, if you will. And I got to tell you, some of the folks that we kind of I talk to other folks outside of the channel too, and it's kind of funny because people are going, well, naturally aspirated is the way it should be. That's how they all came from the factory back in the golden era, which is not 100% accurate. The Avantis and the T-Birds of the day would like to argue that a little bit. But anyway, it's kind of funny that guys really hold on to this naturally aspirated thing really hard. So, if I were to build something naturally aspirated, I don't even know if I would stick with Dodge or Ford. I would probably sell out and go LS or LT, mainly because the aftermarket support is so strong. Although I can make a fairly solid case for something like a Challenger or maybe a truck build. The only downside to building another Mopar like that would be I would never really be happy with the build. I don't want to say it like that. It's just that I know that I would have to make compromises along the way, and I would prefer to do a straight E85 build. And one where, as long as it's E50 and better, the vehicle would do just fine. The combination would do well. The thing with that is you almost have to go LT or Coyote for that to work. And if you were to pick between the two for an NA build, you'd go LT. Just because if you're doing an NA, you can build so much bigger of an air pump out of an LT platform. I mean, the Coyote platform is awesome, but it's just size limited. They've got amazingly phenomenal cylinder heads. I get all of that, but you can get really high flowing LT stuff and have 430 cubic inches to play with, and 430 cubic inches to play with out of a direct injected engine with about 13 and a half or 14 to 1 compression. Well, now you're cooking with gas, and then you can put the cam and the intake on it that you want and just let it rip. So, and I've seen a couple of you guys telling me about a Foxy build. The problem with a Foxy build is I've got to get that car sorted out in terms of suspension geometry and So I got to clean up suspension geometry. I got to fit. There's a lot of stuff I need to really kind of get sorted out with Foxy. One of the things you've got to remember about that car is that it spent a lot of its life as an autocross car. My dad was big into SCCI autocross, and one of the things that is both a blessing and a curse, that car, it handles amazingly well, but it is twitchy as hell going down the highway. And there's a lot of things that are kind of contributing to that I would need to fix before I decided I was going to go something engine wise. I'll tell you this too. If I ever did decide to go down that road, that 351 has got to come out. And I've got a bit of an issue with Windsor builds just in general. They have a bad habit of having leaky everything. Over time, they've got a kind of a weird timing cover setup on it. It's not like an LS or a small block Chevrolet for that matter, or Mopar. They have this weird timing cover that also acts as part of the water pump. It's a mess. And so anyway, that whole thing would have to come apart. And the problem with doing that, see, here's the problem with that. The second that you go that route, with one of these things, you're building a brand new engine. What I would basically have to do with Foxy is, and I hate to say it like this, but I would have to just abandon the platform that it's got now and go with something that's a bit more, what's the word I'm trying to find here? I'd have to go with something a bit more appropriate for that car and power wise, like build maybe a 408, still stick with 351 architecture, but build a 408, AFR 185 heads, maybe AFR, the newer ones would be AFR 190 or 205s, I think is what they're making, with a completely different intake and something that was going to be somewhere around, on an engine dyno, somewhere just north of 500 horsepower, say a 530, 550 horsepower setup. And, that would be a fun combination, but none of that would work well at all until the suspension is sorted out on that car. Again, it's cool to just drive it, but there's some stuff going on. I need to put a bump steer kit on it. I'm sure there's some alignment issues that need to take place. There's a lot that would need to take place on that car, and there's a bazillion Fox body Mustang builds that are floating around out there. So, but that's a whole lot of money too. I mean, even if I decided to, put different crank rods, pistons in the setup, keep the AFR 185s, go with a different intake, that's still a ton. And it's one of those things where if I did all of that, it wouldn't be any more fun for me to drive. And that's really the bottom line. I guess this is kind of the lesson that you can, if you don't get anything from some of the stuff that I've gone over when it comes to these cars, just any of the builds in general. The problem is the more power you have, it does two things. One, you a little bit more. It's just kind of a human nature thing. But more to the point on that, it's not that you just kind of want a little bit more. It's that you have to make more and more concessions to get the more that you want. It's kind of a logarithmic scale, if you will. And in other words, for the more power that you get, you have to make more and then more on top of that concessions for drivability and other issues. And the point is that I could throw a ton of money at that car, have a faster car, but it wouldn't be any more fun to drive, and it wouldn't do anything really any differently than it does now. Even if, and we're assuming that the suspension and everything else has been sorted and it didn't twitchy and doing all the weird stuff, but it's just one of the more funny things about building a combination is that guys will go, well, I want all the power, I want everything, I want to have. One of the worst ones is the guys with 392 cars. These are the ones that really kind of, I hate to say it like this, but they set the worst tone in a shop, because what'll happen is these guys will come in and go, I want to make and then insert a number over 500 horsepower to the rear wheels. And then you go, okay, so we're going to throw all the cam at it. It's going to be a little bit of a compromise in terms of drivability. You're going to lose some of the tip in snappiness, especially once you start getting into the bigger cams. And your factory intake manifold is going to start to become the restriction at that point. And so what do you want to do about that? Well, they want the different manifold. They want all this other stuff. And you end up with this build that does one of two things. It either kind of flatlines at about that 500 and depends on the dyno, okay? But you get a build that'll flatline around 530-ish horsepower at the rear wheels. But it won't have this driving power curve to it. It'll kind of come up and it just kind of keeps going up and kind of up, but it never really, you feel like the ride is over about 1500 RPM or so before you're actually wanting to shift. It doesn't necessarily nose over, but I think you get the idea where I'm going with this. You lose a lot of the snappy, fun drivability that comes with the 392s. But more to that point, what'll end up happening is there's a lot of, looking over their shoulder at different guys with different combinations going, well, this guy got that number and that guy. And then you have to have the dyno talk with them. And at the end of the day, none of that even started to matter after a while to me because the cars are so heavy. You're still working with a vehicle that weighs as much as these do. And, it's just it'll drive you nuts. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is if you start in on a build, have an idea for what you want, understand that every 10 horsepower that you gain, you're going to be giving up something somewhere else eventually. A 392 with a small cam, by the way, everything picks up. Partial throttle, all of that. With a small cam. And what I've tried to tell guys is, look, if you want a car that is just has awesome stock drivability, that is just, it will basically make the car feel like it's got another 30 cubic inches. Then you go with one of my sniper grinds and don't worry about the chop, don't worry about this, that, or anything else, and you're going to eventually get used to it, but it's going to be fast. And the point that I would make with this cam, it's with Quick Brick's car. That car was like, it ran like it came from the factory with a 426. It was just 392 cubic inches. If you can be happy with that, like this generic, 30 to 40 horsepower pickup with torque all over the place and it never lays over, if you can be cool with that, then that's the car that you might end up keeping for a very, very, very long time. What ends up happening too is that guys, when we're talking about NA combinations, they want all the cam, all the intake, all the this, all the that. They go into debt because they're putting all this on a credit card. And they figure out pretty quickly that it sucks because, yes, the car is faster, even faster than that small cam car at a certain point, but just driving the thing around, it's a turd. And that's the issue that I think a lot of guys don't realize. That's part of the reality that a lot of guys don't get is that, oh crap, I put a ton of money into this thing and I've basically built a 540 horsepower turd. And it happens to happen a lot. And it's been my job to try to talk guys out of making big mistakes. And I hope I've saved a lot of guys a lot of money, and I get that. But man, I got to tell you, it can be pretty brutal. What sucks the most, oh my gosh, dude, this is what sucks the most with NA combos. Okay, I've talked about combinations that I was involved with from soup to nuts, right? And that's the other thing I wanted to mention too, is that when I'm talking about one of these combinations, these are combinations that I had my hands on in some way, shape, or form. I'm the guy that put the build together. Wasn't necessarily the guy working on it, but I'm the guy that put the parts list. I put the cam together for the guy. I'm the guy that spec'd everything about the cam. I've got all of this time, effort, and energy to put something on paper that I know is going to work. And I can tell you what works, what doesn't work, and I can tell you what compromises you've got to make and deal with and live with if you want to live in the deeper end of the pool. Fair enough. All right, cool. What sucks the hardest, though, is when guys show up with builds from other shops and they're not happy with them, and the shop doesn't want to give out cam specs. The shop doesn't want to have anything to do with the customer anymore because they sold the customer exactly what they were asking for. Big cam, tried to tune it. The guy wasn't happy with it, and the car would show up at our place, and it's, what? Well, I need you to fix this. Like, you need me to fix it. Okay, you need to drive it out in the middle of the field over there and set it on fire. I mean, that's the only way that that car is ever going to get any better is if you somehow or another get a check from your insurance company for it, because these are the problems that you end up, oh, and it just hacked together. And that's, you know, and again, this gets back in the N8 stuff. Well, so-and-so can do it. They're asking me for $7,500, but it's only going to pick up 45 horsepower. Yeah, but it's a 45 horsepower that's basically an OE style build. Like, this is a clean build with an OE style tune, and everything's gonna be perfect. They go, oh, well, so-and-so can do it for half that. And I've said, please, if that is the big, go. And I try to be very understanding and empathetic when guys are talking about their issues with budgets, right? Like, we're all on a budget, and I want to try to work with everybody, or I wanted to try to work with everybody. But invariably, well, so-and-so said they can do it for half that. Okay, bye. Go get it done for half that. 6 months later, that same car shows up somewhere for sale, or there's some kind of drama behind it because used parts were put in play instead of new parts. Okay, there's that. You've got bad tuning, stuff broke, the whole bit. And there'd be some kind of drama with this. And I'm just like, cheers, homie. You made your bed, you got to sleep in it. But these are the problems that we run into. And that's why when I come back and I'm telling folks, look, don't stray from the recipe, and you'll be a whole lot happier camper long term. Let me get to you guys. Sovereign, what is up? Marco, is it hard to make my truck two-wheel drive? No, but I would just say put it in two-wheel drive. I would prefer four-wheel drive usually, but no, it's not that. It's expensive in a way. I think the hubs are a lot of the stuff you just. It's not hard to do. I probably wouldn't do it. DM is in. Oh, got the ball guy with the shades, got the cadence down. Sovereign close behind. Marco is in. Ryan's in. What's up, Professor? What's up, man? Stewart is in. How about a Foxy build? Yeah, I am really, really shying away from doing anything to that car until I get a few things fixed on it. So I'm saying, I took my car to get the oil changed. They did an inspection, and my lower control arm joints are bad. The rack and pinion is slightly leaking. Oh, that sucks. A couple of steering ball joints that are bad too. Can I still drive the car with these issues? I've got a quote from them, and it's like $3,400. Well, I don't know. I wasn't there to see just how bad the damage is or how bad the wear is. No, anything that has to do with suspension, if you legit have control arm joints that you've got a lot of play in, rack and pinion leaking, I'm not too concerned with. But any of the steering, the ball joints, stuff like that, yeah, that's a safety issue. That ends up being safety. Now, $3,400 seems like a lot, but I don't know. I would say get a second and a third opinion on that cost. Rack and pinion leaking. I mean, I don't know of many rack and pinions that at some point aren't leaking. So it depends on how bad that leak is, though. But everything else is a definite safety issue. Ryan said, Professor, remember Mopar's old the high cross ram? Yes, they had two of them, as a matter of fact. So this must be the random tapping I was feeling the steering wheel. I would say it would be. Stuart's asking, if you're going to do an NA build, do it with Foxy or another Mopar. I would probably lean on another Mopar. With as much as it would pain me, only in that the cars weigh a lot. But if I were to do something and it was going to be a dedicated NA build, if I didn't go LT, I would probably build a fairly healthy pickup truck and go that route. With the main reason for that being they're a lot easier to work on, and I'm just more of a truck guy at heart. So that's probably why I would go that. Oh, Sovereign saying the 06 F-150 was taken in and mechanic said the cam phasers are fine, yet I drove it and the check engine flashes and it hesitates on throttle randomly. May need to have the throttle body cleaned. That's another thing that happens. You'll get a ring of carbon. Matter of fact, you're asking about Foxy. Foxy had like 1/4 of a millimeter worth of funk around that throttle body. It would actually cause it to hang up. So anyway, I would say a solid just nut and bolt that thing. Just go through the whole thing, see if there's something amiss. Make sure there's no vacuum leaks or anything else like that, because that can cause what you're seeing happen with the hesitation. Mark is saying regular cab, yeah. I guess he was asking about the single cab Ford or Ram. I tell you what, if I were to put something together that wasn't NA, it would be the F-150 that I already own. I would just put a blower on it and call it good, which may end up, I may end up selling Foxy and just doing that. Skids is in. What is up, man? So I'm saying sometimes I can have the foot down on it and the truck doesn't move, just RPMs go up. That's almost more transmission sounding than anything else. Or if you're talking about like from a roll and you hit the throttle and it just makes noise and doesn't feel like it has power. I don't know. Without a data log, it'd be really difficult to tell on that. Mark is saying single cab Ford or Ram. Yeah. Skid's hanging out with Sovereign. They're having a bad Saturday. I say I read some of that. Yeah, it sucks. Like saying, what up, Professor B? What up? Oh, Sovereign's hanging out with Skids. True that. Love, hate for sure. Let's see. So we're trauma bound. Yeah. Lower control arm, then that would have to get replaced. That sucks. Car is 12 years old, 2012 Lexus ES 350. It's one of the most resilient vehicles ever made. Oh, Skids had an 06 F-150. I had an 09 with the 5.4. Really liked that truck. My wife loved that truck. X saying about to hit 125,000 miles on my 5.7. Oh, still a baby. I really want to modify it, but it's my daily and don't want to compromise drivability. Driving about 18 and 20,000 miles a year. Yeah, don't. I would say if it's your daily and you're going to do something above and beyond like exhaust mods in a tune, I wouldn't do it. But if you want to do exhaust mods, throw a tune at it or something like that, or leave the stock tune, throw an exhaust on it, maybe put a cold air or something like that, then you'll be fine. Actually, I say that the intake on that truck is, well, what year is it? I'm guessing it's a classic body style. The intake on the classics is actually really good. Oh, Skid saying had an ES 350. It was a great car until it got T-boned. Oh, damn it. Broken ribs suck. I've been there before a few times. Not six. I had just usually one or two at a time. Sovereign's hanging out with Skids. Oh, X saying love the Buffy video. Yeah, yeah. That Buffy's a stud, man. I'm not kidding. Buffy has been a really good truck. 27. It's got over 200,000 miles on it. It runs better than it did when it was at like 20 or 30,000 miles on it when I took over that truck. So, I've got nothing to complain about. The only beef that I have with that truck had to do with the tire pressure monitoring system and the type of valve stems that came on that thing. And what I did, this was like 2 days ago. What was it? Friday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever it was. Had heavy duty screw-in style TPMS sensors put in that thing. Because I'm on the road a lot with that truck, especially when I'm on, a 2, 3, 4 hour run with that truck. I can't afford to have tire problems or TPMS problems and the thing leaking. That was a nightmare. But I was true to myself. When the truck came back from having them all replaced, I did loosen all the lug nuts and then retorqued them all to factory spec. So I'm glad I did. There's nothing worse. And I screwed up, and I apologize for this, guys. I ended up tossing. I had to replace one of the left-hand side wheel hub on that truck. Now, it had over 200,000 miles, and it was probably a good idea to just go ahead and replace it because, I don't know, 200,000 miles. But the reason why I had to replace it was one of the studs was so galled up because somebody hit it with an impact. I had to use an impact to get that lug nut off of the stud. But worse still, I was out of town. The same TPMS problem came up. Tire was going flat. Had to remove the right front. And one of the lug nuts was on there so tight that I thought I was going to snap the stud getting the lug nut off of this thing. So anyway, there's that, but it is what it is, right? And by the way, that's the one that I fixed. The left side is the one that I ended up replacing. So that's the mess that I walked into on that. Oh, Sovereign saying it doesn't happen all the time, but man, it is dangerous if you're trying to hit it and it doesn't move. Absolutely. Itches in. What's up, man? Zero saying, I've heard a few guys regret boosting their 392s. If you keep it at 7, here's the problem with boosting a 392. 392 is a weird engine because it is a phenomenal NA engine and it could be unimaginably awesome boosted. We had built E85 versions of that car, stock displacement, putting well over 800 horsepower to the rear wheels on Pro Chargers and built transmissions and E85. Yeah, pretty nasty. And those combinations, by the way, were not turned all the way up. Those were just kind of, we're leaving it here kind of street combos because they're customer cars and we weren't going to start, playing stupid with those things. But where the 392, you can go really wrong with it is, man, it's all about fuel quality and it's all about the tune. What would end up happening though, a lot of times guys would they got gun shy with 392s and they would put tunes that were very soft on those cars. And so you'd go from, like on a Mustang dyno, you might go from making 405 horsepower to the rear wheels to making 515 or 520 to the rear wheels. But the cars just felt flat. They didn't feel good at all. I know that Alex had tuned, I don't know, maybe a handful of those cars. He had tuned a handful of them, and there were a few of them that had the the canned ProCharger tune in them. And the older canned ProCharger tune was spooky. Like that thing had a lot of timing in it, and that's what would pop a ringland and create an issue. It's just the ring, it's not a problem necessarily, but here's the other side of it. Those cars have real tight ring end gaps when they're hot. And I've always said, look, if you're ever going to boost one and you're going to take it seriously, you need to do a full teardown. And if you're going to use stock pistons and rods for whatever reason you would want to do that, you're going to still have to open up the ring gap to like 27 thousandths. And that's just the way that it is. That's a big piston, and you need to open up that ring gap quite a bit. In fact, you can make an argument that 28 thousandths is actually the right number. And it's basically, it's 6 hundredths for every inch of bore is kind of the walking around number. So 24 thousandths for a 4-inch bore, right? So if you think of it like that, that's usually kind of a safe range. Some guys like to use 7. I don't think you have to go that big, but I mean, it's not going to hurt anything for sure, as long as you index your rings correctly. It's not that big of a deal. But I guess the point that I'm making here is 392s love boost until they don't, and that's more the point. And that's not, another thing is, that's not a tune thing. It's just, you're better off doing a full build if you're going to go 392 and run serious kind of build. And this is the other thing, the 392, if you're going to run boost, don't run half an atmosphere. In other words, if you're going to run boost, don't run 6 or 7 pounds. You're going to want to run around 10 pounds of boost. You're just not going to get there with a tight ring gap the way that they come from the factory, and you're going to be limited by fuel anyway. Because at some point, you're going to have to be running corn. It's just a mess. And that's the other thing. If you want to run boost on a 392, stick with the walking around way of doing it. Get your 130 horsepower to the rear wheels with the right blower kit and the right tune, running the right fuel, and just let it ride from there. And if you want more power than that, sell that thing and get a Hellcat, and then the sky is the limit if you want to stick with Mopar stuff. Just make sure that the Hellcat you get is a 2018, 2019 and up. I was going to say, curious to see what B thinks it may be on the Ford. It may be the fuel, the throttle. There's a bunch of stuff. I was going to say, we put 87 in it the other night. 87 is what is said to be fine in that engine. It is, but it depends on where you got the gas, too. And you get it at a bad, somewhere where it's bad. Let me tell you, okay, I'll give you a perfect example of fuel quality and why it's a real problem. Today, literally today, I was running, and it'll happen really more tomorrow, but I'm running the fleet, so to speak, and I had fired up my Triumph Thunderbird to take it for a spin. It had been sitting for a hot minute, and it's got about half a tank of gas in it. Here's the problem. The fuel that's in the tank apparently pissed pretty hot in terms of ethanol. And that bike did not want to run. I had to nurse that thing around, I had to nurse it around the shop. I had to nurse it around the parking lot. It was really trying to only run on one cylinder. And finally, the thing, I just took it out and started making laps. This one little area right here where I can just kind of go circle, 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 and in various, varying throttle inputs. And it finally shook loose and started running right. I'm pretty sure that the ethanol it probably gummed up one of the injectors and it was causing a misfire, and it was just pissed. That happened today, and it's gonna happen with the Daytona. I can promise you. It's the modern gas, man. And I've got to run Foxy, and I've got to drive that car almost until it runs out of gas, because the fuel in that thing is getting pretty old. And again, as fuel gets bad, the performance, the octane starts to drop, and it's just, you get condensation. It's all the way around not a good thing. Fill it up at Arco. I think Arco gas sucks ass. It might. Might have been bad gas. Skids love when B slides his chair back and removes the specs. That's when you know I'm about to get to something, huh? For sure. Shrine saying, I feel like 392 should just stay stock. It's not worth doing anything to him. Bang for buck, it's negligible. Any 10-speed Coyote or 10-speed Mero will put a gap platform, go Hellcat. Well, here's the thing. On the highway, absolutely. Here's the problem with the 392. This is, well, what used to be the problem with the 392. It's not like that so much really anymore with the Mustangs. Scat Pack with a tune, nothing major done to it. Drag wheel and tire setup. On a drag strip. I mean, do I need to give you any more caveats for this to be in every favor for the Challenger? You would be shocked how many races that car wins. That is like an 1170 car in really good air over and over. And this is if a 2019 and up. That's over and over and over and over again with a good amount. Well, not a good amount, with some weight reduction. With a lot of weight reduction, it's an 1150 car. With no weight reduction, it's an 1180 car, right? 1190 car. It's an 11-second car. Mustang is going to be running it down on the big end. You cannot outrun a Coyote, period. End of discussion. The Camaro, you can pull a ton of weight out of a Camaro. And a lot of folks don't realize that's what a lot of the Camaro guys do. There's like no exhaust, the whole bit. I knew a guy that had one, and that car was fast in a car, at 10-second, and I don't think he had anything but exhaust on the thing. Anyway, there wasn't a whole lot done, but he had a lot of weight reduction to it. And if he needed to, he'd hit it with nitrous and it would run 980s. But the point that I'm getting to is, man, the 392 and the Challenger or the Charger that it's in is a great street engine. It's a lot of fun. It's punchy. It's snappy. And it makes really good power. It's just that the thing that it's bolted to weighs a lot. You know, if it didn't weigh as much, it would be different. But again, if my aunt had a package, she'd be my uncle. So the conversation kind of stops right there. It is what it is. And I'm kind of with you a little bit on that. Throw some exhaust on it. If you want to put a cam in it, it's an expensive endeavor. You can. And then usually you'll be neck and neck from a roll race with a Coyote with a small cam, and it'll rip and it'll be fun and everybody will have a blast and it's just a neat thing. But the more you try to make 392 car go fast, the worse it's going to be in the areas where it really does shine. And that is in comparison to like a third gen Coyote. The latest batch of Coyotes that are out now, they are torquey down low. They make power up top. It's not the same conversation anymore. So if you're just buying a car and you're going out and having fun with it, the Coyote stuff, because you can't really talk about a Camaro, they don't exist and they don't make them anymore. They exist, but they don't make them anymore. You get what I'm saying? The Coyote, it's a different animal now. It's not the third gen. And that's what folks have got to understand. It's punchier. Yeah, the outright horsepower part of it, it's a little bit more. It's not a lot more. But it's still, it's just so good now. And I haven't been keeping up with them, if I'm being honest. Since I got my F-150, I'm really kind of enamored with the Coyote stuff. It does have areas where it's a little bit down on power in weird little doldrums, just like every car is that has an automatic. You can't really, that's not a Coyote thing, that's an all car thing. But I will say this, my wife and I today we're out goofing off, running errands, and just enjoying hanging out together. And we had to make kind of a U-turn. And so I had to kind of turn back. We're kind of in a traffic thing. And I just kind of rolled on the throttle of that truck, and it lit the tires up, and then it hit second, and I mean, just barked the hell, just ripped second nicely. And we're just, with this 4x4 pickup truck that's, like it's like a Luxo barge. I mean, it's funny, but it rips second gear barge. It's just, that's fun. That's where the Coyote is now. And I tell you what, that Hurricane 6 won't do that. And by the way, I'm just on 93. I'm not on corn. So as technology keeps progressing, the V8 just keeps looking better and better and better. It keeps making more and more power, and they're still very efficient. I mean, my truck gets really good fuel economy figures, so I can't really bitch. Although it's not as good as Buffy, I have to admit. But Buffy's Buffy. Buffy's a rock star. Stuart, thank you very much. Is Buick the first American car company to go turbo? For mass production, damn it. So maybe the Corvair, I think, was the first mass-produced car to go with turbo. It had a flat six turbo. Buick, when did Buick have a turbo? I can't remember. Corvair was a fire trap. My dad had one. My dad loved that car. I want to say that was a 1962 or 1964 Corvair. Anyway, one of them had the Turbo 6. But that was a long time ago. And then you had Pontiac. Pontiac had their turbo Trans Am, the 301 with the turbo, which was just not good. And then what else? Who else had turbos? I'm trying to think of the old stuff, not any of the Grand National. Although the Grand National, I will say this, the Grand National was probably the first dedicated, talking about from Buick, which would have been the T-Type before that, would have been the first. The 3.8 liter wasn't a ground up, like the engine was it already existed and then they put turbos on it. I'm trying to think of the first engine that was a dedicated turbo engine. I can't think of them, because most of the American vehicles were all pre-existing NA combinations that they made boost work for. So was it the Jetfire? Okay, so the Jetfire, what year was the Jetfire? I couldn't think of the name of it, but you're right about that. So a fun fact on the Jetfire was also, you're exactly right. The Jetfire was developed to have water methanol injection, by the way. It's kind of a funny thing. But yes, one of the iterations of the Jetfire was water. It had water meth injection. You can believe that. That was a pretty cool car too. Oh, and one of the issues with it is that Buick dealerships sold the water methanol injection fluid for it and people wouldn't buy it. They would just put water in it. And that was an issue. Sam saying technically preceding the Corvair Monza by a few months. Okay, there you go. So yeah, the Jetfire, I forget why it was a flop though. But part of it might have been the water meth injection. And there was something, it would limit the amount of boost based on whether or not it had water meth injection, if I'm not mistaken. That was a pretty sophisticated system for what it was back in the day. In fact, it used, I think it was a water meth nozzle that sprayed right into the turbocharger, I think, as a matter of fact. Kind of crazy when you think about it. You check in with you guys. Then, like I was saying early on, this is going to be a bit of a short show. So, but I do want to get to all of you guys. We've got a lot of folks in the chat, so I want to make sure I just scrolling back up through. Eric is in. Good to see you, buddy. Let's see. I'm just going to have to pick a spot and start rolling because I went. You got a lot of folks in. It's a mechanic saying the F-150 needs a tune-up. Oh, Gary saying the check engine light flashing is a misfire count. Once it hits a certain number, it'll stay on. I wonder if it's a bad plug or bad coil packs. Stuart, why is it that so many supercharger companies are in California? That's where a lot of that got started. So I'm not sure as to why. Yeah, Gary, might get lucky on spark plugs. More likely coil pack failure. Could very much be. Pretty much anything. That's why I was saying without a data log, it's going to be hard to tell. Eric is in. Hello. Saying good evening, everyone. He's saying put a hot air intake on it for the sound. Pedal box is a good thing. I like that. They're saying it was a beautiful day today. Of course, I had so much to do around the ranch, but I was grateful for a gorgeous day, even though I couldn't get out on the bikes. I will be out on them tomorrow. Lime is in. Eric is saying hello to him. Yeah, there's been some pretty nice, there was a nice weather today, so I was happy to at least get out on the T-Bird for a little bit. Ryan saying, anybody else beside me that like glass packs on Mopar Muscle or the Super 40? Super 40s sound good. Glass packs with an H-pipe sound really good too. But then again, Super 40s with an H-pipe sound even better, so I don't know. Let a 392 work its voodoo on you. I do like a 392. Oops, Sovereign's hanging out with Eric. Oh, sun's up in Mountain Grove, Missouri. Nice. Rocking the side-by-side. Dude, I would love to do that. Sounds like so much fun. Oop, Eric's hanging out with Sovereign. Yeah, I miss ripping it up on the oil field roads. That was a lot of fun when I was a kid. I was trying to say, I used to have a nasty scat tuned by Jay. I had headers, E85, etc., but I regret it. Would lose all the time to the 10R80s. Yeah, the 10R80s from a roll are tough, and you're not going to mess with those unless you've got a cam in one of those cars. It's not going to happen. And I've been around the Coyote stuff for a hot minute. We didn't just mess with Mopars, guys. Alex literally wrote the book on how to tune Coyotes. And so we had Coyotes, a lot of Mopars. Don't get me wrong, a lot of GM stuff too. And, you got to know. It's just, the Coyote stuff is just really that good. But it's also the car is smaller, more aerodynamic. There's other things that are assisting, if you will. But yeah, the 392 is awesome right out of the factory. But saying, Charlie got a bath today. Nice. Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Ryan saying his son where he lives, he can just rip those roads out to Arkansas. That's badass. Corn, corn's not bad. I mean, most of the components are good. You have to be more on top of your maintenance. And I do like the 392 right out of some saying crappy Arco gas. Yeah, I like the 392 right out of the box. It's hard to beat. It's just a great engine, and in the right environment, it wins a lot of races. But it's got to be in the right environment. I was trying to say, you right about the sky's the limit with the Hellcat. I have a Bud making 1,000+ horsepower, just a few things done to it. It doesn't take much. The fun thing about the Hellcat, it's not so much that the sky is the limit, but you can build a dead nuts reliable low 10-second car. I held the record for stock boost 93 octane for the better part of a year and a half, and it was me and Jim Mopar going back and forth. He's in Canada, I'm in South Texas, and so there was no meeting in the middle to try to figure out who had the quickest car. Say if he posted a faster number, he had the record. If I posted the faster number, I had the record, and we were quick to congratulate each other. But both of our cars had minimal things done to them, and they were both 10.0 cars in the right weather and would consistently run 1020s, 1030s in bad weather. So, it's just part of the fact these cars are really that good. Hard Rock, thank you very much. 392, seed delete, 93 octane. Yep, drag pack equals deep 11s. Very deep. That's a mid 11-second car in good air. Fun car. Very fun car. Looks like Skids is out, kind of scrolling back up. Oh, hang on a second. Oh, Shrine, yeah, as I'm scrolling back up, I saw your comment. I wonder why California only gets 91 octane while the East Coast has 93. Always been wild to me. I used to live in California, and I lived in Northern California, and I never could wrap my head around why that was. It makes no sense to me. It doesn't matter. It just 93 octane the world as far as I'm concerned. So if all you had was 93 octane, the cost wouldn't really be that much different than regular gasoline. And manufacturers could build cars with internal combustion engines that are just simply more efficient. You would have it be very regular to have 11 or 12 to 1 compression, and on direct injection engines, you could go 12 or 13 plus to 1 with boost. It's just kind of how it works, and the fact that they don't do that is just weird to me. 87 octane, just so you guys know, 87 octane does not apply to any engine that's made today. Just because the engine will run on 87 octane doesn't mean that it is optimal whatsoever. The only time 87 octane makes any sense to me is at significant altitude, where you simply can't use or won't be able to use the octane that's available. So octane is just a measure of knock resistance. The higher in altitude you are, the less air there is. The less air there is, the less air there is to compress and then ignite to make power. It's in essence the exact same thing as throttling back your car at lower altitude. Less air comes in, you don't need the octane because there's not as much load per se, right? That, to me, but still, 93 octane doesn't hurt anything, and no, it doesn't burn any slower. That's absolutely not true, because if it were true, then you would need varying timing for varying fuels. And in that case, you would need more timing for 93 octane than you would 87. And especially at partial throttle, and that it's proven that there's no difference there. They both have the same flame front propagation within the combustion chamber, so that's out. But why we don't have that in place by the by the fuel refineries is just beyond me. Because if you look at it from the economy of scale, like all you had to do is make one fuel instead of two, and then they combine them at the pump for 89. Why? Come on, man. Help me to understand why it would be bad to just have everybody use 93 octane. I don't get it. Let's see. Let me keep kind of scrolling here, guys. Oh, Itch is asking, what's different on the 2019 and up Hellcat? The operating system is a little bit better. All the 2019 and ups, the cylinder head bolts are just simply better on the later cars. It's not that it's, for the street, it's kind of an irrelevant thing, but I prefer the 19 and up cars because of the operating system. That's the updated Uconnect. So it's not anywhere near as glitchy as the older cars, which is a big deal. And it's a newer car too. But if you ever are deciding that you want to put together a Hellcat, you need to get a fuel hat removal tool. And the day you buy that car, put a brand new fuel pump in it. Fuel pumps go out on Hellcats, and they age out. I don't understand why this is, but they do. They age out at about like the 5-year mark. And what I would do is I'd put a new fuel pump driver and a new fuel pump in that car the day that I bought it. It takes all of 5 minutes to knock it out, but believe it or not, fuel pumps and Hellcats are super easy to do. Just make sure you run the thing completely out of gas or drain the tank, whatever. But yeah, I mean, they're awesome vehicles. Absolutely do enjoy the hell out of them. Oh, Shell's 93 octane threw a code on the O2 sensor. No kidding. That is weird. Shell's usually really good fuel. But I say it's not the bike, but the rider. It's not the car, but the driver. Very true. I'll drive the competition. Simple. Yep. And Skids was checking out. Stuart, thank you very much. Again, that's about where we're at here. Corvair was a fire trap. Mom's in. What's up? Buttermilk says hi. Buttermilk is my mom's 09 Chrysler 300 Heritage Edition. Neighbor just got a Tesla Cybertruck. Get the fire extinguisher ready. Reddit was weird, powerful, and silent. Do you know anything about them? A little bit too much. Looks like a stink bug. Yeah, so I do know about them. They are weird. And yes, I will need to see this thing up close soon. Those things are monsters, by the way. Hey, Mom, love you. Oh, Buttermilk, yep. Sweet car. So for you guys that don't know, Heritage Edition 300s were extremely rare. Nobody really picked them up. It's basically an SRT8, but without the 6.1 liter. It had just it was top of the line interior. It's really kind of a rare car. You don't see them too often. Dealerships didn't get that many allocations of them. This is kind of a neat car. Ooh, Hard Rock's in. I've beaten my buddy's GT350 several times in the quarter mile. Easy to do. A 392 can break a lot of hearts out there, which I have done very frequently. I'm 9-1 this season, only losing on the big end to a GT500. The thing is, here's what you've got to remember about any of the drag racing stuff. It's there's so much more to it. If you look at the number itself, just what did the car run? That'll tell you a lot, but you got to remember that you've got to run the car next to you if you're racing. If you're not racing, just run your car. That's the other guy is just there for his own benefit, right? He's only there. There's like a wall between you. I can tell you this. My car, when I've run guys with fast stuff, and it's funny, I would dead hook, I would get down the track, I would go through the beams, and they would have problems that I didn't have. These guys would, you'd have traction issues, or you have, they don't know how to launch the car properly, or something weird electronically goes haywire, whatever it is. That is their issue, and that's their problem that they've got to get sorted out. You're just there to run your race. But there's always going to be that rivalry, especially with Scat Packs and, well, Mustangs, because it is the best type of racing. You've got a heavier, big displacement car versus a lighter, smaller displacement car. Big displacement makes the torque. The small displacement makes the horsepower on the back half of the track. Let the drama begin. And it is a fun race. And that's where it is a true race. It's at the tree. If you win the tree, you win the race in that environment. But the problem is that the 5.0, at least up until this latest iteration, would have had to chase that Challenger all the way down the track. And it's funny because you would see two cars with wildly different miles per hour going through the back half of the track. So always fun to watch that. Let's see. By the way, it's the old Oldsmobile Cutlass. Cutlasses are fun. Oldsmobile and Buick. Buick for a hot minute. Okay, so Buick was leading the charge at one point with dual overhead cam, 4-valve V8 back in that era. There was a time in the mid-60s where it was real apparent that 2-valve stuff was going to get beat by 4-valve. You had a bunch of old World War II mechanics that were trying to make everything 4-valve. You had Project 904, I think, is what the Hemi replacement would have been. They'd have still called it a Hemi too, by the way, which is funny because people today go, it's not a real Hemi. Well, 4-valve per cylinder is kind of by default. Technically not Hemi, but it's Pentastar, and that it would have still been called a Hemi though. Anyway, you had that one. Buick had one too. And unfortunately, nothing really ever came of it. The ball stud Hemi, which is just like a Dodge's version of a Mark IV Chevrolet big block, to be honest with you, which is to say a canted valve Hemi, that strangely enough didn't ever take off. In fact, the one ball stud Hemi powered car was in Houston, and it in somebody's collection, and then it is in somebody. Anyway, long story short, they actually kind of messed around with that engine and made it kind of hot rodded it, believe it or not. But yeah, the ball stud Hemi would have been, if Dodge would have done it right, would have been Dodge's answer to or predecessor of, I can't remember. It's like, again, there's like a few years that kind of get juggled around in there for those manufacturers in my head. But I will tell you this, the ball stud would have been the big block that powered everything. You'd have seen ball stud Hemis in motorhomes and tow trucks, and everywhere you see a 454 big block that Chevrolet makes, boats, even if the thing only turns 3,000 RPM, that you could have done that with that setup. I find that kind of curious. Yeah, Eric, Dodge had a lot of potential with the Hemi, but they had even more with they had even more potential with cars later, or engine designs that were actually way before that they could have done more with. Oh, bummer. Yeah, Sovereign had gold with white hardtop. That's a rare one. Chevy 350. My mom had a four-door Nova. Thank you again, Hard Rock. Appreciate it, bud. Eric's hanging out with Stewie and Hard Rock. They're saying, hit the like button. Yes, hit that like button. Yeah, all the 5.7 variants are good. Moto X and Reagan killed the V8. I tell you something, the funny thing is that when all of the EPA regulations hit, I was just a little guy, but I remember folks saying, well, the V8 is going to be out and all you're going to see are going to be turbo 6 and turbo 4 cylinders. And I was like mortified by the idea, but I also didn't know a lot about engine design. Believe it or not, though, if it weren't for those turbo 4 and turbo 6, 4-valve 6-cylinder, 4-valve 4-cylinders, if it weren't for that technology, the V8 wouldn't have had the resurgence. And it's because of that technology that the V8 was able to keep on trucking, even though it didn't really get good until, about a decade later. Hard I don't even like running 87 in my John Deere. I don't run 87 in much of anything if I can help it. The 70s oil crisis, well, that's part of it. The funny thing is that the 70s oil crisis, it was really more a matter of taste at that point. There were still performance vehicles that were being made, sold, bought. But the overwhelming majority of buyers were not interested in muscle cars anymore. They had moved on. Their tastes had changed. They wanted the more personal luxury contraption. They just really were not into because here's what had happened. A lot of them had already owned it. These are guys that were, say, in between the ages of like maybe 14 and 15 years old and say 30 years old in 1962, 1963, 1964. A lot of those guys that had the muscle cars from the mid-century era, which is to say they had built up a 55, 56, 57 Chevy, Ford, Dodge, whatever it was, built that hot rod up to a certain point. They were watching the cars get faster and faster and faster with more and more bigger engines, things like that. But as you got into the 60s, these guys were trading the other cars off, getting these other ones going fast. Drag racing becomes a big deal. And this is at a point in time where a lot of guys that were in World War II, they would have been, let's say in 1964, they're in their 40s, right? So these guys, let me think about this for a minute. These guys at that point had the funds, they had the money, and they had these hot rods, right? But their kids were also doing the same thing. I guess where I'm going with this is you had a lot of people kind of aged out of the muscle car, and then their kids aged folks, or say 10 years younger, they're buying the car secondhand. These cars were already ragged out. Where I'm going with this is these were all back of the lot cars. And if you're into old school car lots, you had the stuff that's in the back of the lot. This is the stuff you took in on trade. You gave somebody $300 for it. I'll get it off your hands. It's smoking. It's rattly. It's this ragged out big block Buick that nobody wants because it's falling apart. Whoever had it before was blasting through it, ramming gears and doing everything else. They were used up in essence at that point. And yeah, you can have something that is mechanically, it starts and drives, it runs or whatever, but it's not even good enough for parts anymore. Plus, these cars rusted, and anywhere north of the Mason-Dixon line, you're going to have all kinds of issues with road salt and everything else. They were just done at that point. And it is what it is, right? So what they ended up doing is they got into the more luxury type thing, and it just, the tastes really did change. So yeah, the oil embargo certainly didn't help anything, but there are some that will argue that the true muscle car was well past its prime and well on its way out, really by the demand was still there in 1973, 1974, but as the 70s progressed, that demand waned quite a bit. So, Hard Rock, thank you very much. Do I miss being in the seat? I miss watching you race, maybe again someday. You know, I miss it. I miss the people that I raced with, although I still ride with Orange Crush a lot. We take the bikes out and go hammer out the twisties. I'll say this. I miss it, but only in short bursts. And the reason why I say that is I can get into my F-150 and have a lot of fun with it. Like I was talking about earlier, my wife and I are driving, we're running errands. I got to, make a U-turn. I want the throttle. I'm hazing the tires. It hits second. It barks second nice and hard. It's just kind of fun. I get to enjoy the fun part of cars and not necessarily be so hyper focused on something where I'm trying to break a record, make a record. I'm helping other folks try to cover record numbers on their end, so yeah, there are times where I would love to get the call. Somebody says, "Hey man, look, we've got a car we need you to run this weekend." I'm like, "Yep, sure, no problem, I'm there." But I don't mind watching other folks have their time and have their time in the sun, their ability to enjoy, and their skill set to evolve to whatever level mine might be. And just because I'm more accomplished or I'm better than somebody, it just means that somebody hadn't done it for as long as me. If you do this kind of crap for as long as I have, believe me, that you would probably be better than me. So, I don't really look at it as any of that. I'm happy to cheer folks on at this stage. But thank you very much. I appreciate the contribution, my friend. Core, I'm just switching through here. Anybody have any advice on what RPM to activate and deactivate nitrous for a Windows switch? Is currently set to activate at 4,400 and deactivate at 5,800. I'm guessing by those RPM numbers that you have a 5.7. 4,400 is good. I would probably stick with that. 5,800 might be a little bit overkill. I'd probably shut it down at about 5,600. Your ship points are not going to be much different than that. But 58 means that you will spray through the ship. So I wouldn't, on a 5.7, that's actually not a bad place to be. Oh, Hard Rock, prep versus no prep, driver skill, tire selection, DA, all that. I'm scrolling back through here. Sovereign's asking about a straight 8. Straight 8s are not good. The problem with a straight 8 is the length of the crankshaft itself and the amount of main caps that you have to keep that thing rigid. Torsionally, they have a nasty habit of oscillating. V16s are the same way. If you can keep them short, that's why Bugatti has their W configuration. Is to try to keep that crankshaft as short as possible. Lime's asking if I'm doing a lot of this backwards. I'm sorry, guys. If Lime's asking if I want to do a cam on my Hellcat just for theater, is it worth it? No. I don't want to lose anything, and it's not necessary to gain anything just for sound. I wouldn't do it. I really wouldn't, because it ends up making the car kind of soft. It'll make basically the same power. It won't really make much more with the cam. But if you pulley it up, you can get back to the same boost number, and then that's when things get real interesting with Hellcats. Mom saying, come by, I love you too. I will call you tomorrow. Some are saying Cybertruck looks like a low polygon vehicle from a Nintendo 64 game. Summer's and it's gone. The V8's gone full circle. Saudi Arabia had all the petroleum but no beer. Oh, Stuart saying the later Hellcats have line lock. You know, I never liked messing with the factory line lock or the Taser line lock. Stuart saying V8s will come back. I'm pretty sure they will at some point. Hydrogen's going to be tough, man. Hydrogen is really bad on oxides of nitrogen. So when hydrogen burns, it still has a high NOx value. So it's not a deal breaker, but it's the storage of that fuel that's such a big deal. I was a big proponent of hydrogen as a fuel, but it is incredibly difficult. It's got to be liquid hydrogen. Gas hydrogen, it takes up way too much space. And to liquefy hydrogen, you've got to be at crazy pressures. Lime, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you so very much. Saying thank you. Well, thank you. Hopefully I helped. Someone saying, please hit that like button. Yes. Oh, hang on. But thank you very much, Lime. I appreciate that. Oh, sorry. Sorry, we're saying efficient is better. But yeah, no, Sovereign, the straight 8, the problem with the straight 8, it's also packaging, because a straight 8, depending on how you set it up, is going to be a long engine unless you've got very, very small displacement. But nobody, I don't think, has done a W8, which is kind of a weird. If you're not familiar with a W8, W configuration is, it is an engine like a W6. You'll see those in Volkswagens. Pretty killer engine too, by the way. It was a VR6, but you're staggering. It's a very, very narrow V. And the cylinder head and the combustion chamber are such where the inside it's angled, but on top it looks like just a regular flat cylinder head. So you get the size of, let's say, an inline 4 with the displacement of a 6-cylinder in that respect. So for a V8 or a W8, you would get roughly the size of a V6, but the power or the displacement of the V configuration. They're a little bit of a pain in the ass to machine, but once you've got the machine set, it just does machine things. I don't know why that particular configuration hasn't done better, but no, the straight 8, the straight 8 back in the day was never meant to turn more than like 3,800 RPM. That's why they had them in those old cars. But yeah, as efficiency goes up, everything is cyclical. By the way, 4-cylinders were good for KZ1000s and Z1s. Yes, they're still very good. So I'm talking about that Challenger, the new Challenger that was released. I'll tell you what, man, from a styling exercise point of view, I've got a little bit of a hang up with that car, and it's the freaking gap between the tire and the fender on the front of that car. And I know in my head I'm over exaggerating this, but it looks like it's starting to look like a gasser to me. One of the issues that I have with people that try to resto mod Challengers and Barracudas, and this also will bleed into anything from the 60s, really, and early 70s, is that they try to put like too big of a wheel on the thing, and it fills the wheel well up in a weird way, and it's always kicked in a weird asymmetric, like it just doesn't look natural. It doesn't look right. That car looks like the front wheel is too small, but at the same time it looks too big. I don't know how you can screw something up twice in two completely different directions, but they figured out a way to do it. That's the genius. And so I'm having, every time I see one of those new Chargers, they're not Challengers, but the two-door variant, I haven't really seen a four-door. I've only seen the two-door, really, is what they've been showing the most of, or at least that's what I've been seeing the most of. The more I see it, the more kind of confused I am by it, because like the interior looks good. The car isn't bad. There's just like, there's this like weird, like uncanny valley here that I just cannot cross with it. And I can't, without seeing it in person. I was talking to Racer X about it. We're just kind of shooting it on the phone one day. And he's like, it's not that bad in person. I'm like, dude, I can't get past what it looks like in images though. There's this gap, and when you see it, you cannot unsee it. The back of the car looks okay. The middle of the car looks okay, but there's this thing with the, anyway, that's where the problem for me lies with that thing. Stuart, that was the Shelby Challenger. What did I miss? Oh, the Challenger that I was thinking about, the other, I think it was a four banger. Yeah, in fact, there was one that came up for sale. That's actually, so for you guys that don't know, the Shelby Challenger, which led up to the Dodge 600, which was an ES platform, but also led to the Daytona and the Omni. The funny thing about it is that the Daytona and the Omni, really the Daytona is what I'm talking about here more than anything. There were 11-second combinations for that truck in the direct connection catalog. Like, oh, you've got a Daytona, a turbo, a 2.2 liter Daytona. You want to run 11s. Here's what you need to do. Here's the parts you need to do, or you need to buy and install to make that car run 11s. And guys were out there smoking fools with that car. And it's just kind of crazy. They had like a 15-second, a 13-second, 11-second. They had all kinds of combinations in some of those. Pretty neat stuff. Destroyer 1320, my dude, is in. Do not forget, get your theft deterrent transmission override locks from Destroyer 1320 now. If you haven't done it, do it now. I think we still have a discount code for that. Yep, Sovereign's already on it. Yep, get over there now. Sovereign's got there he is. Already got my mod on the case with the link to the website. Good job, sir. Yes, get your plates though now, like right now. You know what's funny? Oh, Destroy, I didn't tell you this. You weren't. So when I moved my Hellcat on, one of the things that the guy liked about that car was that it had your plate in it. His Hellcat was stolen, and you know how it was stolen? They broke into it. The guy popped the thing out, and he ripped the transmission unhook, and they pushed it, and they loaded it on a flatbed. So, yeah. If you don't think they work, guys, they're a huge deterrent. If that car would have had that plate, they probably would have just ran off, and the guy would have just had a busted window. So straight ain't bad, yeah. But yeah, so anyway, yeah, his Hellcat was stolen, and that's how they got it. Can you believe that? So, Sovereign, I did see that link, but I haven't had a chance to look at it, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty sick. Configure IGLA to discrete button sequence like pin code to authenticate vehicle start and engine operation. Interesting. Thank you again, Lime. I appreciate it, buddy. Yeah, the other thing that I had done to that car, I had the RFID bricked, which is both a good thing and a bad thing, I guess. If you lose your keys, it's really bad. But oh, the Blackwing. There was one for sale here. Where was it? It wasn't that long ago. So I'm saying W8 would be interesting. Oh yeah. Oh, Hard Rock. Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody uses the trans brake. I think everybody that races these cars just foot brake it. Yeah, back in the day, Packard had the straight eight. IGLA YouTube describes systems well. Very cool. Oh, Sovereign's not liking the 57 gassers. Yeah, a gasser they're an acquired taste. There it is. Moto X, thank you very much. Just popped up saying, find another car before this winter. Man, I'll tell you what, so many hours in a day. Man, I've kicked around the idea of, one thing or another, this or that. And if I did anything, it would have to be something that I could focus on for the street more than anything. I just don't have a drag strip that's local or convenient anymore. And that makes it real difficult. Hard Rock, thank you very much. Thoughts on the 68 Super B? Love the 68 Super B. 68 is, as far as Mopars go, are kind of, it's like one of my favorite years. I love the look of the Super B though. And one of the things that I like the most about the Super B is that, or Dodge in general in the mid-century era, the thing about Dodge at that point was nobody, and I don't care, it's outside of, Imperial still Mopar, but outside of maybe Cadillac, I'm talking domestic brands here, outside of, well, even Cadillac, Mopar did styling better than everybody. That's I guess the point that I'm trying to get to. You look at the Mopars from 64 through really 1970, the Charger, the Savoy, the B and C body cars, though, especially, were just such good looking cars. But the Super B was just out there with the way that it looked, had the cool effect had the B's wings for the headlights. Those things were amazing to look at. And, with a 440, with the big block in those cars, amazing to drive. The big block cars that I've driven, the 440 variants are the ones that you want to drive. The Hemi stuff, I'm not saying that they're bad. When they're set up the right way, I guess they're good, but the 440 cars are really the ones that you want to drive. Plus, they're the ones that are going to act right on the street. But yeah, I love me and I appreciate that, buddy. Yeah, I love the 68 Super B though. 68, sorry, 68, anything is hot. Yeah, 68 is the right year. 68 Charger, really for all cars. My favorites are all 68. 68 Charger, 68 Mustang GT. I'm a bigger fan of the 68 Camaro than I am of the 69, just with, the way that the car looks. There's nothing that I can think of until you get into the 70 with the Challenger and the Cuda that I like another year more than. There are some subtle changes with Corvette from 68 to 69 and 70 with the chassis, but almost everything I prefer that 68 year. 68 B body, hell yeah. Hot August Reno had some badass Cornettes last month. Oh, cool. Sovereign 68 Chevelle and the Nova. The Chevelle is a good looking car, don't get me wrong, but the interior treatment on a Mopar is just completely different. It's on a whole different level. But I do like a Nova though. God, there's one that a guy keeps in an open storage lot over here. It's probably a 70. I think it's 70 or maybe 71 Nova. And it is just turning into iron oxide as it sits there. Hard Rock, thank you, sir. 446 pack or 446 barrel? 6-pack. The 6-pack car, the big deal with the 6-pack is you get away from the pancake intake manifold. So what you have to understand about RB big blocks is that they all use the same 4-barrel intake manifold, and it's a very flat, very not good intake manifold. That 440 is rated, the 4-barrel car is rated at 370 horsepower. That is optimistic. The real number is more like 350-ish. That intake manifold is bad. It's just not good. But you put the 6-pack setup on that car, it raises all the runners up. It is far and away better. It's every bit as good as any of the more modern 4-barrel intake manifolds that you would put on that car, and that's where the power really did come from. Those cars, I'll put it to you like this. If we're not talking about a max wedge cylinder head intake manifold setup for that car, the 6-barrel car is, or the 6-barrel setup is going to be the one that you want. And people say, oh, they're a pain in the ass to tune. They're this, they're that. No, they're not. They all use the same common plenum. They all use the same linkage. You're going to be running off that 2-barrel most of the time anyway until you start showering down on it. So it's just a better setup overall for that engine. That the 440 is an interesting engine in that it is a big displacement engine that uses cylinder heads with a very small cross-sectional window. The cylinder heads on a 440 are okay by high-performance small block standards, but I'll put it, the port velocity famously on a 440 at 45 or 4,700 RPM was the same as the Hemi, but the Hemi needed like 6,500 RPM to match the port velocity. That's why the 440 was so good overall. It was a bigger engine. Actually, it might have been 6,500. Was it 6,500? I think it was 6,500. Anyway, much larger engine, smaller ports, had a crazy initial torque hit. Partial throttle response is just off the charts on a 440. So, that's why they were so good, and why people would say, well, on the street, the 440 wins every single time. You just have to chase it down if you've got a Hemi car. But there's always the cheat code, and that is the max wedge setup. 426 or a 413 max wedge, that's the heads that the guys wanted to put on that car. And when you look at a max wedge setup on those cars, they are basically making Hemi kind of power. Make no mistake, you didn't have to have a Hemi to make Hemi kind of power. If you had a max wedge, you're already there. But thank you very much, Hard Rock. I appreciate that, buddy. Sorry, 68 Mustang, 68 Beetle, 68 Ambassador. It's a good car. 68 Barracuda is a good looking car. got the Nova. Moto Gabe got it 68 GTO. Well, Sovereign, yeah, imagine what a Challenger would have. Well, the Challenger, here's the funny thing. Mopar was kind of slow to that party. They did not get into, they did, but they didn't. So the Barracuda preceded the, or yeah, didn't it? It preceded the Mustang by like 2 days or something like that. But it never, it was a Valiant. And it never really, it had to evolve. It was just kind of a late bloomer. But damn, I mean, if you're going to be a late bloomer, that's how you want to do it. Oh, Hard Rock, thank you very much. Was the Max Wedge factory option or aftermarket? It was a factory option race part for the 413 and the 426 RB big blocks, and it was the super stock Dodge, the original, like the little old lady from Pasadena. The super stock Dodge would have been a 64 Savoy or a 63, maybe it was a 63 Savoy with a fourth, I think would have been a 413 Max Wedge would have been in that car, something along those lines. But yeah, you could order them. You could order that car from your local Dodge dealership. And I think you could order the parts through your Dodge dealership too. If you, I mean, you could put the Max Wedge stuff on a station wagon if you wanted to. Eric's hanging out with Sovereign. Oh yeah, it looks weird. That the new Charger just kind of looks like something was different there. Yeah, no, well, that's the thing. The 6-pack versus the 4-barrel. Yeah, that way better. And the thing is that this is what upset a lot of folks with 440 4-barrel cars, is that aside from a cam difference, there wasn't any difference between that 440 and like what you would have found in a station wagon, for example. There wasn't really anything that was any different there. I think they were all 10 1/4 to 1 engines. So you wouldn't have seen, like, there wouldn't have been anything really separating one of those engines versus another in terms of realistic output. You wouldn't have seen anything. Sorry, 440 Magnum, Kowalski approves. Yes. .383 is a good engine. 383, that's the low deck big block. Fun fact on that thing though, 383, you can also run a Max Wedge setup on a 383, and that's a pretty sick little package too. But I'd say to date, Gabe Trailers is 68 Torino every year, along with his mom and 2 frozen margarita machines. We used to have a margarita machine in an office. It's called a blender. And it was in my office. Jeffrey, 68 Dart, yes. Sovereign, yes. The Challenger was set to compete with the Cougar, with the CUDA supposed to compete with the Mustang. But the problem is that even then, those cars were heavy for their day by comparison. 68 Firebird 400, very good. A buddy of mine with a 69 Firebird with a 400. All right, saying with Mopar, I love the old ones. Even though I drive a 21 Scat, I might get a 68 Super Bee someday just for fun. It'd be the one to get. Moto X like 69 split grill Charger has 383. It revved. Yeah, I came so close. The 60, yeah, it was a 68 Roadrunner with a 383 console car, Sunfire Yellow, and the guy sold it. Still kind of pissed about. I just won't stop talking about that. No, the 383, it didn't. You'd have, if you're talking about inverted, it'd really be the pistons being flipped if they were offset. But most of the time, I don't even know, to be honest with you, that's the other thing about Dodge at that point in time, the build quality. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it if they were flip-flopped every other cylinder. That was one issue. Again, a lot of guys had with Dodge. Like if you look at a Dodge, you go, there's no way you can deny that is the better looking of the cars. And when you drive them, there's no way that you can say that car, that there's another one that drives better. Sure, empirically, there might be something that puts down a better number or whatever makes more horsepower, but that doesn't tell the whole story. You know, you don't drive calculators, you drive automobiles. And when you're talking about the overall driving experience, you've got to take that into account. And the Dodge always did extremely well with that. The problem with Dodge, and this is where it got the word, this is why a lot of people didn't like them, is, and this might sound a little bit familiar in a way, but it was the build quality that shot people down from Mopar. Rust issues. One of the old jokes was that the engine and transmission, the rear end, all of that was badass, and it would be the only thing left of that car in 15 to 20 years. That's people just, and the trucks, guys, I got to tell you, Dodge trucks had the absolute worst reputation as far as falling apart. So, Twins asking, do I know the current stock power 2018 Demon record? Damn. Okay, so yes and no. Okay, so when you start getting into that, you'll start getting into a lot of slippery slope when we're talking about what the record is. Here's what I'll offer up to you. I am in as delivered form. I'm not talking about like, well, it's stock power, but it's been completely gutted and it's on, you know, beer can weight, wheels and tires and all this other stuff. I cannot speak to that because that number had waffled all over the place and it never, I can't tell you which number was finally agreed upon when it comes to that. However, I can, with some reasonable amount of confidence, speak on the as delivered record. We're talking on the NT05s, the whole bit, and that would have been Ray's Redline Red OG Demon, which went a 977. And that's on the NT05s. That is with the passenger seat removed, because in as delivered, it doesn't matter your configuration. You can remove the rear seat because there's a rear seat delete from the factory, and you can remove the passenger seat because there is a front passenger seat option from the factory. But with the factory skinnies, the factory wheels, with the factory delivered tires, 977 out of the Redline car, I want to say still holds the record. His F8 green Hellcat, that's the one that I set up for the very first ever Legion of Demons, that if he didn't cover that number, I would have been driving that car in literally the next pass that it made, went a 978. And I had gone high nines with a Demon. I was the first Demon to run a 9 at Houston Raceway Park. And that was in a completely different car other than Ray's, in considerably different weather also. If anybody has gone quicker than that as delivered, I am not aware of it. And as far as, like I say, the other number is concerned, there were so many people that were just butting heads over that stock power number that I think that it became it. I think it's kind of lost, if I'm being honest. If somebody says let's say somebody says I ran a 950, you have to couch whatever they say with, okay, what was done to it? It's like when I ran the 10-0, not to make this about me, but no, my car wasn't stock. It was just stock pulleys on 93 octane gasoline. But I wasn't, it was still basically almost in as delivered form. It's kind of hard to explain, but see what I mean? So in as delivered, I don't know that anybody's ever beat Ray's number, and I doubt anybody ever will, because I don't think anybody even cares about an as delivered number anymore. They're trying to do other things, and that number, I think after Ray passed away, I think that number was just kind of, I think that record even may have been just retired. But the OG Demon, those are the OG Demon numbers that I am aware of. Sam's asking, wasn't the 383 a small block in a GM and a big block in the Chryslers? The 383 was never an actual engine for Chevrolet, but what you would do is you would take a 400 small block crank, and you would machine it to where it would work in a 350 with a 4-inch bore, and that would, or 4030 bore with the machining you would do to it, instead of the 4 1/4 bore, or 4 1/8, I should say, that comes in the 400, which is 40125. When you did that, then yeah, you got a 383, but that was, you had to build the engine. You had to make that engine. But the 383, but we had, Chevrolet had a 400 cubic inch small block, as did everybody, by the way. There was a 400 era in engines during the malaise era where you couldn't have any compression because of some kind of a weird emissions quirk, but you could bump up the displacement. This is something that's going on in motorcycles literally as I'm speaking right now, with a weird way of calculating emissions. You can have a bigger engine with a smaller compression ratio, and it has fewer emissions, and it's just kind of weird. Anyway, it's kind of gaming the system, if you will. But yes, you are right. The 383 was the low deck big block for Dodge. All right, saying darts are sick too. You can turn them into nasty street beasts. Yes, you can. Right, 1966 Oldsmobile Dynamic 88. I always like Oldsmobiles. Pontiac 421. Yes, they were. Yeah, the Pontiacs were actually pretty sick engines. And it's not all about numbers. 68 442. Yes. Sam is in. Hello, Sovereign. NOX. TRX stories. Man, not a lot. The only TR, I don't have any personally. I was kind of around them for a hot minute when they first came out, when guys were running them. They were running, I think, mid 12s or 1270, something like that. I forget what the number was out of that truck, but a lot of guys, the people that own TRXs will tell you that it's their favorite vehicle. Like that is their all-time favorite vehicle that they've ever owned. And it's easy to see why. It's a big vehicle. It's a comfortable vehicle. It's powerful. And I can tell you that since I've owned my F-150, I really do get it now. Before, I was real critical of the TRX, in that I was saying, look, if you're going to make the TRX, make a single cab short bed or do something for the two-wheel drive guys, make something for the drag race guys. But, I kind of get it. And, if, dude, it's big, it's fast, it looks good, it sounds good. If there were something a little bit more street oriented, I would probably be a bit more interested in it. But again, the guys that have them absolutely swear by them. And the only time they really get rid of them is if they're offered like stupid money for them. So, Sovereign. Yeah. I love 440. I like the Buicks a lot. The thing about the Buick, like the 455 Buicks, that engine is not any real difference. If you were to lift the two, you wouldn't notice the difference in weight between that engine and a Chevy small block. That was its claim to fame, 455 cubic inches, and it weighs just marginally more than a regular small block. The downside is that you couldn't really turn them that hard in terms of RPM. They would start cracking the block. But man, they would make a boatload of torque. And speaking of boats, that's the reason why Oldsmobile 455s were so popular in jet boats, is because they were incredibly light. They made all the torque of a big block and then some. They were all like 500 pound-feet of torque, but they made a ton of power and they were very light, and you didn't have to turn them that hard to get them there. Oh, Sovereign, yes, send me the pics. '68 Nova with a big block. That's a pretty sick combination. Oh, Hard Rock, could I explain what a stroker kit does to improve an engine like 383, 440, etc.? The main thing that it does is it increases displacement through actual stroke of the engine. So when we're talking about stroke, it is the swept area of the crankshaft itself. The longer the stroke, the further that piston goes down in the cylinder, thus increasing actual displacement. Now, it increases torque, but it doesn't always necessarily increase horsepower if you have the same camshaft and you're still rocking the same compression ratio. But your whole goal with a stroker motor is to increase overall power. And what guys will do is they'll put together an engine combination with more stroke, but they'll throw more camshaft at it because you can take advantage of the longer stroke. Your port velocity can stay the same, but you can flow more. And so that's where the balance really lies, is how big of a stroker motor can you build based on physical limitations, which there are a lot of things to consider. But for polite conversation, how much more air will it flow, and how much more cam can you run, and more to the point, can you run something different in terms of a cylinder head to also help it breathe better? That'll be even a bigger advantage. So how do you really justify it? Well, it's tough nowadays. It used to be, stroker combinations were fairly common because you were trying to get big block power out of a small block. Nowadays, you get that from the factory. So to get much more displacement, say, for example, out of your 392, it's not really going to help you too much, because now you're going to be expecting your intake manifold to flow more. If it doesn't, you're not going to get a horsepower advantage, because horsepower is just how much air the thing can flow maximally. Torque goes up based on the amount of air you're sucking into the thing at like mid throttle levels. That's where you're going to notice that torque. I like stroker motors, but they do have their faults. And the more stroke you run, the higher your rod to stroke ratio can be, which is how much your stroke is versus how big the bore is. That will have an influence on how the rod rocks back and forth as you're going through the intake, compression, fire, and exhaust strokes, which can create side loading on the cylinder through the piston's thrust angle. Again, you can see this gets nerdy really quickly, which can cause premature wear. Okay, so there's things that are not necessarily beneficial in terms of longevity, but in the grand scheme of things, for what most guys are going to do, it's not outside of a range of what might be considered normal. But for overall power, a stroker is always going to give better mid-throttle torque. But sometimes at the expense of not being able to make peak power for as long. So let's say you put I'm going to go real generic here, but a 392 with a 10% stroker, bringing it to 426 with the stock cam, intake, manifold, exhaust, and everything else. would make the same horsepower about 10% sooner and about 10% more torque everywhere across the board, if that makes leading up to that peak power number. It'll make more, and then it'll gradually fall off, and so that's what the big difference is. Twin saying, I saw word about Ron Silva doing 940s and a super stripped down Demon on the forum. And see, that's the thing. I know Ron. I've known Ron for years. He used to come to all of my events. The thing is that, yeah, I mean, 940, sure. That's the thing. I mean, you start getting into the race prep part of that, and it's just one of those things where you go, look, I love the idea that guys are getting after it that way. I really do. But what you've got to remember is that there was a time where it was the second Legion of Demons, where it was myself and Ray actually kind of talking shit. Guys were disassembling their cars in the pits. And they were doing it because, well, the first year everybody was kind of running as delivered. You'd see guys with tires and wheels and whatever, and there was some kind of, there was some weight reduction going on, but there were guys on the second year, no door cards, no headliner. If it was a yellow car or if it was a red car, when you walked up to that car, it was red on the outside, red on the inside. Everything was removed. So, even if it had a rear seat delete, the rear seat delete was deleted. Like they had this is why, if you ever go back, you'll see one of the videos. It was when I went a 1008 or a 1005 with my Hellcat. I'm like, guys, the windows still go up and down. Like, I do video of the whole car so you can see what's going on with it. Windows still go up and down. Still got my windshield wipers. Yes, I still have my squirters. Yes, there's some amount of bug juice in there. It was everything. If you could remove it, it was removed. And the more you would start to see these guys, they were removing the consoles out of these cars. They were taking the carpet out of these cars. Everything that you could remove that was getting removed. And at the end of it, I think you could pull like 600 and something pounds out of these cars. So yeah, these guys were absolutely gutting the piss out of these things. And when you do the math on how much weight you could remove versus what Ray ran in as delivered form, I want to say that it was exactly a tenth per 100 pounds. Like, once you pulled the seat out and did this, that, or whatever, the difference might have been like, I don't know, 400 pounds between the two. Something like that. I forget what it was. Anyway, it wasn't that far off from that. And even with that, there was still some controversy with I forget what it was, something about a transmission tune, but the car wasn't, like, the engine wasn't tuned, but the transmission was, and it was because of an issue that the Red Eye variants, which includes the Demon, had with like yipping shifts or something. Anyway, that came into play. So is it really still a stock tune? Well, no, it's not. And again, I was kicking back, and I somehow or another I got called in on this to like mediate on it. I said, guys, look, race car went 970. At this time, race car had gone 978. We hadn't run the 977 yet. And I said, look, race car did that with nothing done to it. Nothing. And I'm the guy that would have put the tune on it. That car was never cracked. It was nothing was ever done to it. So in light of that, I was saying, guys, what if any parameter has ever been changed in the computer, there's going to be a P1400 code. If there's a P1400 code, eject it. It's not stock power. I don't care what anybody says. It's not stock computer, and that's not in the spirit of what we're doing. And that pissed some people off when I said that, because they were saying, well, yeah, but you're saying your car is stock, but you're tuned. I'm going, guys, I never said my car was stock. It's 93 octane stock boost. And let me tell you something. My car, I can claim it as stock because it's more stock than half the shit that's out there that people were claiming to be stock. Like, guys, it's H-Town stock, okay? But if you're going after a real specific thing and it's as special as the Demon, you've got to be, your due diligence, you've got to be super, super upfront with everything that's done. And in that case, some things were but weren't, and something got out. Anyway, it was kind of a mess. But yeah, kind of a disaster in some respects. But guys, I tell you what, we are over 2 hours. Man, I started out saying, it's going to be a short show, and we ended up going deep, man. It's like an old school live. I like it, man. So with that, guys, though, I do have to wrap it up. I want to thank each and every one of y'all for hanging out. Would not do this without you. Love each and every one of y'all. Thank y'all so very much for the support. Look forward to hanging out with you guys soon, but I have got to wrap it up. To everybody that helped make the show awesome tonight, I'll make sure I don't miss anybody in here. We got Hard Rock. Thank you so much. Oh, bear with me here just a second. We got Moto X checking in. Limestein, dude, my dude, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate the 20 spot. Hard Rock again. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. And Hard Rock just nailing it over here. Stuart, also, thank you, buddy. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody in the super chats. But guys, with that, I do got to wrap it up. Listen, get out there and do something cool for somebody. Chances are they need it way more than you know. And with that, now I got to wrap it up. Y'all have a great one. Adios.